Chattanooga, Tennessee, David Tulis.
The paramilitary attack in Chattanooga a couple years ago by a Muslim idealist was not an act of terrorism. It was a military attack on two installations, one a recruitment center, and the second, as he went down Highway 153 and then over on Anacola Highway, the second was against another military installation that has a motor pool with vehicles and also Navy men, including Commander White, who fired his personal weapon at Mohammed Abdulaziz, who perished in the attack. It was paramilitary, but it was motivated by a religious sentiment. In New York yesterday afternoon, there was an attack by another religiously motivated man, presumably Muslim, Saifullah Saipov. And the question again in the press, and I think it should be also in your mind, is what is the answer to terrorism? Is there a local economy answer to terrorism? Is there a free market answer to terrorism? And I would say that there is. And there are a couple of ways to consider a solution. The solution is that one is in the sense of having a means of stopping people in the middle of the act, right? We can't know everybody's thoughts. We can't know everybody's mind, even though we have asphyxiating and exhaustive total digital surveillance of all of our activities, as we'll hear about today on the David Tulis Show. We can't stop them once they start. But once they start, is there a local economy solution if there is a second Mohammed Abdulaziz who comes to Chattanooga to bring death and destruction, or some small town that might become a target, a small mall, let's say in Bradley County or elsewhere, nondescript, not noticed, and suddenly dozens of American people, men, women, and children lying dead among the sale banners and the crowded retail aisles of a mall in some rural area near a large city. Is that what's going to happen? And is there a way of stopping the actual act once it begins? And the answer to that's a lesser question than the greater. The greater question, of course, enters into the matter of higher causes, of the reasons men engage in terrorism, and the religious counter argument. It is a matter of religion in the end. And the question is, do we simply have mechanical responses, such as the armed citizenry solution, which is the one I'm going to mention first, or do we have a larger argument to make that is religious? It has to be religious to meet a religious claim, right? The man Saifullah Saipov is a religious activist. He was calling out God is great as he was taking a bullet in the abdomen from the New York Police Department. He having two nondescript, non-effective pseudo weapons in his hand. One, I think, was an air pistol. He was not thinking of fighting by arms at that point. He had done his damage. He had done glory to his deity in killing representatives of the infidel. That would be people who were on their bikes or strolling in that bike lane along the wharves there in New York, on the western side of Manhattan. And he had done his job. It doesn't matter who was killed. He might even have killed faithful Muslims on their bikes for an early afternoon jaunt on a day off. The Muslim man and his wife perhaps mowed down, and it doesn't really matter to the actor, the Muslim actor, the ideologically motivated, the religiously motivated man who kills. So there are two analyses that I think would be fruitful to consider here on the David Tulis Show here in Chattanooga and Helena County, which had in 2015 its own incident, you might say, its own terrorist attack. Now, again, I say it was not a terrorist attack because the targets were military. It was a paramilitary attack on soft military targets. That's what it was in Chattanooga. It was not terrorism. Okay, it simply wasn't terrorism, though it inspired terror, the same kinds of fears that terrorism evokes, and that would be the quavering of the populace and the clamor for the police state. The terrorism has a great beneficiary always, and that is the police state. The policing function, the paramilitary function, the military function, the occupation function of the national government, of even the state government, and the provenance of the force of arms. That is what gains whenever you have terrorism, and that, I think, is one of the goals, the religious goals of the Muslim who commits acts of terrorism or who commits a paramilitary attack in a civilian setting against people, armed people in a civilian setting. That would be these inland recruitment centers and inland bases. They are no threat to anyone in the Middle East. They're no threat directly to any of the holy sites, though the representatives of the same organizations that had those recruitment centers, the Marines and the Army and the Navy, their representatives are in fact in the Middle East right now, and they are in fact in war engagement in all but one African country. Every country in Africa right now has active military people, as they say, boots on the ground. Those are your sons and your daughters, convinced in a noble bit of marketing that their sacrifice, they're putting themselves at risk. They're making hazard to themselves in the service of Uncle Sam, is for the greater good. And this is the best part. This is the part that just really warms my heart, is to preserve our freedom, right? These soldiers, all volunteers, these Navy people, these special forces, these PSYOPs, these trainers that we have, that the federal government has over there, they're all doing it to preserve our freedom. I want you to know that. And if you can have any comfort from that suggestion and that reminder, go ahead and take it. I will let you do that, and I will just avert my eyes so as not to embarrass you. This is David Tulis, a skeptic. I am a skeptic, and I think I bring these things up not because they're local. Okay, this is not a local story. It is, and yet it is a local story because we had our Mohammed Abdulaziz's attack, and his death, and we had courageous actions by police officers, some of whom were injured by bullets from the AK-47 semi-auto that he had, and were very heroic in bringing an end to that siege on the civil tranquility in Chattanooga. But I bring it up because, like I say, it's a national story that affects us here in Chattanooga, and we are at 800-8949, 800-894-9. So just a brief on not, we have. I'm trying to get to Wendell Berry, so we're gonna have to get local soon here. I'm gonna be feeling really cold behind my mic. This mic, by the way, on the David Tulis Show, gets so hot that we have to put an ice pack on it when I'm done. And sometimes the conversation that you and I have is so egregiously warm that there's an actual glowing. If you turned off the lights and covered up the windows to prevent being seen during a bombing, and it were dark in here, you would see the thing glow. And I'm working on that now to get it up to proper temperature so that the transmission of our FM signal will be beyond the ordinary reach. And that's it's not just signal. It's the virtue of what is being said. I hope that makes the signal go further. We are, by the way, 92.7 FM and also 95.3 HD4. I'm still learning those numbers. Those numbers really don't mean anything to me, but they do mean something to you, and that is something to think about. 95.3 HD4. So that's 95.3, but it's on HD. Okay, we're not the other one. We're the one on HD, high definition, long range signal here on the David Tulis Show. We're the home of Sean Hannity and CBS News, and Keon Rose in the evening. Keon Rose with our sports analysis. Local guy, our guy Keon Rose, every evening, just before dinner time, you can pick up Keon. Now we have an endless war, and one of the wars that the man Sayfullo Saipov was objecting to was the one. Even though they're all in his mind, they're all blending together. And but there's one I want to mention just because the Boston Globe published a piece that, he had this liberal newspaper that has forgotten entirely the anti-war position. The modern press has no anti-war position anymore. It's all very pro-establishment. But here's a a piece that came to my attention from the Ron Paul Institute of Peace and Prosperity by Stephen Kinzer at the Boston Globe. And he's talking about the battle at Yemen, which, of course, is 3 years now, a war that the Americans have paid for and we have fueled and supported and given munitions for against Yemen, which is the poorest country in the Middle East, by the richest, attacked by the richest country, that's Saudi Arabia. He says Saudi bombing has created what the United Nations calls the largest humanitarian crisis in the world. Half the population is hungry. There's cholera, all about 1 million people afflicted. A child dies from preventable causes every 10 minutes. Saudi forces have blockaded Yemen's main port. Stephen Kinzer says, outrage at the American role in this war has led several members of Congress, notice 400-plus member body, and several members want to propose a resolution that would pull the country out of unauthorized hostilities in Yemen. If they can force a vote, it may come in the first days of November. This will give Congress a chance to decide what role Washington should play in Yemen. And if you think that our engagement over there is fruitless, just look at a Judicial Watch. Just by the way, here, just in the notes, right in the stack, as I'm getting to my point about our defense. We have two defenses. There is a right understanding of God. If you have a right understanding of God, you'll have a right place for fear, and fear is what the terrorists want us to have. And I think we need to consider that from a religious perspective. Fear is something that you give to your God, right? And if you have fear as a general concept, you will accept all the tyrannies, all the despotisms that our good people in Washington can give us. And you'll do it. You'll accept these tyrannies gladly because you have an idol that has replaced God, and that is fear. Now, Judicial Watch has a post, and you can see this if you want to read this note. It's at our Facebook page on Nooga Radio. That's Nooga Radio on Facebook, and also we're also live, by the way, on YouTube at Hot News Talk Radio. U.S. blows $4.1 million in another shoddy project to rebuild Afghanistan. And here we have Judicial Watch bringing to view federal incompetence. The federal government is incompetent in everything it does except policing. Okay, probably policing and surveillance. Even though there are internecine fights among the surveillance and police state hierarchy members, they are incompetent. But it talks here about a federal audit. It's called SIGAR, the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction. What a name! You're the SIGAR head. In March of this year, the Congress appropriated what it calls an eye-popping $117.3 billion for relief and reconstruction efforts in Afghanistan. It flows through the DOD, the Department of Defense, and also USAID, which is the U.S. Agency for International Development, famously corrupt agency. Judicial Watch has for years monitored and reported on this reconstruction debacle that continues fleecing people like you. Most have been documented in tremendous detail by SIGAR. They include the mysterious disappearance of nearly $500 million in oil destined for the Afghan National Army, and from an oil exporting country, formerly a $335 million Afghanistan power plant, seldom used, and an $18.5 million renovation for a prison that remains unfinished and unused years after the U.S.-funded work began. And of course, we have ties to Al Qaeda and Taliban. There's a company mentioned in this press release, Megatech, which has connections with the Taliban and Al Qaeda. The government admits that because there's no accountability, there's no record keeping, or no follow-up, there's no really a clue on which program is effective and which ones are not. There's a failure, for example, in poppy management, and there's a huge increase in poppy cultivation and opium production. Opium production rose 43% on our watch, of course, in the Islamic nation to an estimated 4,800 tons and 201,000 hectares of land under poppy cultivation, 10% increase from the year before. There's a reference in this story also to the work of Megatech, which is supposed to create a training facility, right? Despite being handsomely funded, the facility was not constructed or renovated according to contract requirements. There were instances of poor design and construction contractor noncompliance. and unauthorized product substitution that resulted in the exponential waste of as much as $4.1 million. Saigar writes, okay, so there we have this, all of our good intentions. Okay, let's just talk. We're talking here about even in the wasted capital, even in the misaligned, misallocated capital, there are good intentions, and I highlight the good intentions because what you're supposed to do is supposed to say, well, of course, whenever you have something like that with foreign contractors, there's going to be spillage, and even that's good because right, it's local people that are getting that money, and so on. Well, we can just turn an eye away from that and hope for the best, right? That's because we have good intentions. Well, those good intentions don't bring us very far, especially with people here in this country who've come on various kinds of visas, as Sayfullo did. Sayfullo Saipov, the man who's come out of surgery now, he's apparently in recovery after surgery for his bullet wound, and he's here to bring a message. Okay, there's a message that the terrorists bring to us, and our response is what they want. They want us to be full of fear because that is their God. These are people whose message is probably the least attractive, the least doable, the least functional, the least true of all ideologies, and that, of course, is the Muslim concept of submission, Sharia, and worship of the deity. Now, to get to the answers, so there are two answers, and we're gonna have to think for a moment, in just a moment, about some of our important sponsors here at Nooga Radio. And I want you to consider supporting all of our sponsors and thinking that my platform here in Chattanooga will be the absolute best venue for your advertising dollars. We are the absolute best venue for your advertising dollars. Think about having me write your spot, okay? Let me write your spot for outreach to the other listener, right? There's another listener out there, and you, my listener, want to know, well, can I get that man into my shop? And I think I can help you. Just let me know. Contact me here at the station. Now, the technical answer to terrorism, it's not really technical, but it is, you might say it's practical, and that is the armed citizenry. And here now we have a local economy solution to the terrorism problem, and that would be that men become armed. The armed citizen, right? He can't stop. We can't prevent because we don't know people's hearts, and we can't possibly know their minds, even though we can survey all their doings online. We can't know their motives. And so their hearts being their own private secrets, we can only know the content of that heart when it spills into action. But when action begins, do we have people in Chattanooga, in Hamilton County, who would act as the defense, right? That would be defending women and children. That's the main thing, the main group of people we want to defend. We, as men, have a duty to put them first. Always first, even if it's not your woman or not your child. If you are there and able to defend them, that's your job. Okay, you're a man. You, my listener, you need to be willing to die for that party. Now, that may be a big charge to you, and if I'm going over your head or offending you, please forgive me. But I think that's what God calls us to be, and that is being willing to die and to protect others, and not just seeking our own skins, right? Not just seeking to protect ourselves, but the lives of the innocent near us. What can we do to help? That's always the question. What can I do to help? What's the emergency? I'm here to help you. What do you need? And there are 500,000 armed citizens in Tennessee based on Department of Safety and Homeland Security's data. This is not fresh data, by the way, and I don't have in front of me the 2016 numbers. But in Hamilton County, as of 2014, there were 21,961 armed citizens, that is to say, licensed by the state, people who yielded their constitutional right to carry weapons, even I'd say to wear them, though that is subject to regulation under the Constitution. And they are licensees exercising a privilege. In Hamilton County, again, 2014, 21,961. In the 6 surrounding counties, there are 16,000 people who are licensed by Governor Haslam to wear arms. They are practically the defense that we can't have from when you have a centralization of security. When security and safety are delegated to others, the population is entirely fragile, entirely vulnerable to lone lamb attacks. Yeah, it's a lone lamb attack. That's what we have with these people who are said to be terrorists. They are lambs, right? They're sacrificing their lives for their cause. They're lambs outwardly and perhaps inwardly as well. Outwardly, you could say they're inwardly they're wolves perhaps, but they're outwardly lambs. They are laying down their lives for their religious cause, and unwilling to die the death to have their imaginary reward under their ideology if they perish taking down the infidel. But the first offense is the armed citizenry. Again, it's a local economy solution. Here, if we are confident, if we don't live in fear, we will bear arms, we will carry arms, we'll be responsible, we will be safety-minded, and we will be courageous as God in His providence calls us to be in circumstances into which He has put us, right? If He thrusts you into that circumstance and you're the armed citizen, you're taking your life in your hands, but that's what you're called to do since you agreed to wear that arm in defense of women and children here in Chattanooga and in local economy.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio.